Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's walking tour and video, which was voted for by our Patreons, located in the beautiful region of Cumbria in northern England, we visit the iconic picturesque castle that traverses centuries of English history. From its strategic beginnings as a defensive stronghold to Lady Anne Clifford's significant renovations, the castle bears the scars of time and the unforgettable marks of those who shaped its destiny. Today, the ruins invite visitors to explore the past and appreciate the enduring heritage of this historical monument in northern England. This is Brougham Castle. Built in the early 13th century by Norman Baron Robert de Vipont, Brougham is strategically positioned along the River Eamont. The castle's impressive architectural design includes a solid stone keep and a fortified curtain wall, showcasing the defining features of medieval military construction. The castle was built to primarily defend against the Anglo-Scottish armies, rising up against Vipont's liege, King John, and built on a pre-existing Roman fort of Brougham, giving it the foundations and stonework needed to fortify the castle for centuries to come. As we enter through the large, intact, three-storey double gatehouse, we are met with a structure that is made up from three different elements. Although from the outside it looks as if it's just one single building, the three elements include an outer and inner gatehouse with a courtyard between them. The castle started out to only have the one gatehouse at first, as the inner gatehouse in itself would have been more than self-sufficient, with its own portcullis and gates. But it was around the 1300s that Robert Clifford, the Lord of Brougham at the time, decided that something more stronger was needed to reinforce its safety. Two gatehouses, a few yards apart with a courtyard separating them, met this need. Each of these gatehouses had 2 stories above its gate passage, and as we wander inside the first set of lodgings and look around, you can see the detailing of the fireplaces and the windows. What's quite clever about this layout is that if the enemies ever broke through the first defences of the first gatehouse, before they could even get to the second, they would be in the prime position of coming under attack from missiles and arrows flung down from the upper floors of both the gatehouses, including the keep which is attached to it, making this an effective killing ground, blocking the enemies in if they needed it. The floors above the passageway each consisted of a large single room and were connected to the keep, allowing people to move freely between the two without having to go outside. In the 17th century, Lady Anne Clifford converted the top floor into her private bedroom. The large rooms in both the gatehouses would have been used as residences, although the very top of the gatehouse no longer survives, but it would have been fashioned by machicolations, reinforcing the strength and defence to any unwanted visitors. The inner gatehouse also provided an observation point. To see this room, we walked up the short steps and into the passage. This passage allowed the watchmen of the castle to keep an eye on the postern gate opposite, and also they were able to keep an eye on who was coming in and out. There are windows in the chamber to look out over the courtyard, again to make sure the right people were entering. There's also a theory on the complex construction of the gatehouse development, and that it was very important for medieval noblemen to be able to display their wealth, their success and their power, and of course there was also a theatrical side to it. The Brougham gatehouses, en route into the castle's main courtyard, was likened to a stage set, and of course the imagination runs wild with the idea of the lord of the castle, with his many followers with flags on spears, and their cloaks thrashing in the wind, whilst they proudly march inside on their horses towards the keep. One of the most important visitors to the castle was Edward I, in around the 1300s, who spent a night entertained within the castle walls. With the Scottish War bringing Edward to the forefront of the borders, Robert Clifford would have reasonably expected more visits from him, although none were ever recorded apart from the one. It's said that the minute a king stays in another man's house, it became his for as long as he remained inside it, which would have been a motive for Clifford's improving, altering and adding to his castle here at Brougham. with the prospect of being able to provide the accommodation for the court and his king. Over time, Brougham changed hands several times, and each noble family left a unique imprint on the structure. The Clifford family played a pivotal role in its expansion and enhancement during the 14th and 15th centuries, transforming it into a fortified residence that combined comfort, luxury and defensive features. The tower that we're heading towards was named the Tower of Liege, built by Robert Clifford in the 1300s. Like the double gatehouse, this tower also had an important defensive role, not just for attackers outside the castle walls, but also any enemies that dared to break through the gatehouse in the hopes to storm the keep. It was often referred to as the Tower of the Liege in 1723, which of course could have been its original name. Origins of this name also mean the Tower of Lordship, in reference to its commanding position on the southern end of the castle. The impressive tower was 4 stories high, with each of the floors consisting of a single chamber built with a fireplace and a latrine, suggesting that this was more luxury accommodation and favoured for more important guests that came to visit here. The tower's square plan is typical of such structures that were built in northern England at this time, as seen in castles such as Warkworth and Egremont, although it contrasts with the rounded towers in the south. Just some of the more reasons to appreciate the workmanship that went into the careful planning of this castle. The next series of rooms consist of the castle's communal rooms, where the garrison gathered to sleep, eat and pray, all under the watchful eye of the Lord. The first room would have been a block of lodgings, still quite impressive in size, and possibly built under Roger Clifford in the 1380s in response to the Scottish threat, or it could have also been just another addition and feature to the castle made by his grandfather. Either way, it still shows us the castle's military function, and its need at any given time to be able to give shelter to a number of fighting men. All of the mod cons were put in here too, and if you look above the east wall, you can still see the outline of a pitch roof, which showed the level of the building after it was reduced in height, possibly at a time when the need for a large garrison was no longer needed. Heading through into the next room and into the castle's chapel, also built by Roger Clifford, just like the lodgings, this room was possibly meant for use of the larger garrison of the 1380s. In 1385, Roger had 30 men-at-arms and 60 archers here in the castle, as well as the usual garrison. Even though this was quite a small amount of men, in the late 14th century there could have well been over 100 fighting men in the castle, all needing somewhere to relax and refresh, all needing that space to eat and sleep, whilst making sure their equipment and horses were looked after. In its heyday, I can imagine the place would have been quite full with life. The chapel building was of a nice quality, and it was on the first floor and above a basement on this level that we walk. If you look up, you can see the impressive 3-arch sedilia, where the seats for the clergy would have been, and you can notice the empty wall that would have housed a basin for the sacred vessels to be washed. Overall, just showcasing the high level of masonry work that was done in the castle. And just through the doorway and into the small inner courtyard, and the castle's well. And next door is the kitchen, which would make sense to have the well in this position here, so that the water supply was in close proximity to the kitchen, which was essential for the cleaning and cooking. On the other end of this small room, it was accessible via a doorway on the right, which would have led you to a causeway across the once Roman fort. This room that we're now in is the basement of the kitchen. Next to here is the castle's second hall built by Roger Clifford. We only skimmed over these rooms, but the hall that is next to this kitchen was such an important part of the castle for Roger. He would have needed to show himself and mix within his followers and garrison in order to gain their loyalty. He did so by eating with them. Roger would have sat on a raised perch on a platform, whilst his followers would have sat down north of him, and he would have faced the door into the kitchen, where the food would have been brought out directly to his table, to then be carved and distributed out. During the mid-17th century English Civil War, Brougham Castle witnessed turbulent times. As passionate royalists, the Clifford family garrisoned the castle, pledging their loyalty to the monarchy. However, the castle fell into parliamentary forces in 1643 that led to its partial dismantling and neglect. Now heading inside perhaps a personal favourite part of the castle, which was the keep. The keep was the earliest part of the whole castle that still stands, to an incredible height. The bottoms of the 3 stories are the oldest, and they are said to date around 1175. This is based on their style and similarities to other castles of that time. But interestingly, evidence has stacked up and suggests that the keep could not have been from before the 2nd decade of the 13th century, and that Robert de Vieux had old-fashioned tastes and employed an old-fashioned mason. This basement that we're now standing in was actually used for storage, although a lot of other people assume that it was a prison or a torture chamber, but instead it was merely a storage for barrels of beer and sacks of flour. Amazingly, we're able to climb the spiral stairs to reach the keep's top, story by story. The first floor of the keep would have been where the reception room and possibly a guard room would have been housed. The views across are just spectacular, and a favourite thing to do is just look down and around to see the mason's skills between the floors. Onto the 2nd floor is where it later became the Lord and his family's chamber and residence. And Lady Anne also slept on this 2nd floor inside a private chamber when she was here during her visits, and it was on this floor that she eventually passed. But perhaps the most surprising and one of the most beautiful parts of this keep and castle is on the 3rd floor. After climbing the stairs once more, you are met with the most wonderful surrounds of the river and the countryside. It's super picturesque, but walking all the way around the wall passage reveals the oratory. It's hands down one of the most impressive and surprising features of the castle, and it's such an amazing experience. Like the whole of this 3rd floor, it was built by Robert for him and his family's private devotions. Where it's now weathered, the room lights up with the architecture, and it really impresses me how ornate and detailed all of the vaults, the carvings and the figures are in this room. You're first drawn to the 7-ribbed vault with a central boss that's carved into the shape of 2 heads. The camera unfortunately doesn't do this justice, but it gives you more reason to go and see for yourself. There are also a number of dates and names carved into the stones, which is interesting to see. This would have been such a sacred and private room to have been able to access your thoughts, and now it remains on the top of a mighty keep, hidden and not well known. After taking a final look around, we were just blown away by the vast beauty that Brougham holds inside its castle walls. The castle stands as a captivating reminder of the past, weathered and jagged ruins aside. It offers glimpses into the former regal glory, providing an immersive experience that connects us with the stories that lurk in the walls. We were really impressed with our time here. It was such an interesting and elegant visit. You get to use your imagination to envisage the lives of the people that once walked here. Everything about a visit to Brougham would be a delight, even on a rainy day. I think this castle has absolutely everything you could want out of an explore, and is a great place to enjoy a day out. So that's it for this week. We hope that you've enjoyed watching, and would love it if you could hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel or to any of our links in the description, including being a part of our channel members or patrons, which helps us continue to do what we love doing. We want to say a big thank you to our patrons and to our channel members for supporting us. So we'll see you in the next one. Till next time.